The base has dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's December 31st. It's New Year's Eve. And we are live talking about the best of the decade. That's your Tuesday Thoughts topic of the day. Best matches, best teams, best players, best moments. You want to go into best kits, go for it, whatever. Best of whatever you want to get into over the last decade in the world of soccer. Jessica Sharman's going to join us in the last half hour of the show, and she'll give us her thoughts on those topics. We'll get into all that as we go this morning, but join the conversation on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. If I sneeze during the show, I'm going to apologize up front because my sinuses don't know what the temperature is anymore. It was 70 degrees, and people were walking around in shorts on Sunday. Took Gwen out this morning, and it's like 38, 37. And that doesn't play very well with my nose and the things that go behind my nose into my head. And sneezing and stuff, and it's just bleh. That's how it is right now. Bleh.
Happy end of the decade.
Seriously, just pick a temperature, Mother Nature. Like something for at least like more than a day, and then my nose can get used to it. Little bit.
It's hot. It's cold. It's hot. It's cold. Why don't you have a temperature and stick with it? It's a Seinfeld.
I wake up and it's like I better check the temperature because it could be 60, it could be 30. I don't know. Do I put on the wool hat? Do I put on the big coat? Do I just put on a sweatshirt? Do I just put on a hoodie? Like I don't know. So. We will try to get through it as best we can. This is the last show of the year, so we're going to give you the best we can give you. We will not be live tomorrow. We will be back on Thursday. All right, big news of the day. Not a surprise, but Atlanta United has refused to release 3 players to U.S. men's national team camp here in January, preparing for a match against Costa Rica on February 1st. The training camp will be over 20 days in Qatar. And I've seen a lot of questions about that, like if the U.S. Soccer Federation is now not making as much money as they used to, why would they go on a training camp here? They're probably getting paid to do that, I'm assuming. Yeah. Don't know for sure, but that's a pretty safe bet because that's how these things usually go. But it's a long training camp for a match that doesn't matter and is well away from any matches that do matter. And you're getting to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals in June when matches matter. You'll have a international window in March where players will be released, I would assume, 4 games because it's not going to conflict with things for Atlanta United. What's Atlanta United doing over that span of time? Preparing for CONCACAF Champions League. And when they did the same thing when it came to Barco going to the U23s for Argentina to try to qualify for the Olympics, not really a surprise that you would get the same thing for 3 players for the U.S. men's national team. That's not even getting into what happened with Miles Robinson at the end of the season. That's just basic, okay, you do it here, you're going to do it here. Not really a shock. I guess the biggest surprise out of the whole thing, John, is that Brooks Lennon was going to be part of this group. He's been part of the U.S. U23s, but Brooks Lennon getting this call, it's a good thing for Brooks. It doesn't really matter for this situation, but for Brooks to get that recognition, that's a good thing.
No doubt. And you get to see the list of names, and there were some names on there that were getting their first time look-sees and things like that. And for Brooks to be added to that, I thought that was a cool tip of the hat to Brooks with everything that he's done up to this point. And when you see the word that Atlanta United is declining players to show up, I looked at it specifically as they got work to do. And with training camp halfway around the world and games that don't mean anything right now, for me it was like, look, we got stuff to do. We need guys here. It doesn't matter. I mean, love the fact that you thought of us. we got things that we got to do. But fantastic that Brooks Lennon was part of that process.
And I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that what happened with Miles Robinson factors into this.
Right.
I think the fact that Barco wasn't released to Argentina made this a foregone conclusion, regardless of what happened in the past. But that has to factor into it because, these are games that Barco's matches with the Argentina U23s would be more important. They're not matches that you have to release players for, obviously, but you're trying to qualify for an Olympics. A 20-day training camp halfway around the world, followed up by a match against a CONCACAF opponent, not even in a FIFA window, so it's not even full national teams that are participating. Is that something that you should release players from your preseason training? No, it just doesn't make sense. That's why I'm a little surprised when you see this roster and you see some of the players that were released for this. And you see a player like Walker Zimmerman. You see a player like Sean Johnson, although goalkeepers are a little different. I think they can handle this sort of thing a lot easier. But a player like Walker Zimmerman is the one that jumps out to me the most, with LAFC going into their first CONCACAF Champions League. Jordan Morris from Seattle. A little surprised that the other CONCACAF Champions League teams allowed players to go. I would have expected them not to do that.
Yeah. And let me ask you, when you see someone like a Walker Zimmerman brought to camp, is that in a way to help bring guys like Araujo and Chase Gasper, who are new to the process, to help them, and that guidance to have that senior guy there to help negotiate what's going on here? Was that part of the perceived balance? I mean, for me, you have veterans and then you have the guys who are getting their first call-ups. Was that kind of what you were looking at here with all of this, or is it just, what was, when you see these names and the veterans along with the first-timers, I mean, like I said, it was cool to see that, but why do you think it was the extremes the way that it is?
Well, Zimmerman's only got 11 caps. He's not that much of a veteran. I don't think that had anything to do with it, because you didn't really call anybody outside of Areola, Zardes, and Morris who have more than 20 caps. I think he just called the best players that he wanted to call up. I don't think he was really thinking about it. It's not a FIFA window, so you can't call everybody up. So you're calling the best you can. And Zimmerman would be one of the best that you could. Miles Robinson would be one of the best that you could call up here. I'm just surprised that Zimmerman was allowed to go. Roldan, Morris were allowed to go. Johnson, little different. That's okay. I'm not as surprised with that one. But I don't know why you would let these players go and not have them for your preseason training for CONCACAF. I'll be curious to see how all of this plays out, because from what we know at this point, Atlanta United's the only club who has not allowed players to go to this camp.
And, I mean, for me, you look at the list of names, you see Kappas, you see KO, Paxton Pomacall getting reps. It's good to see Jackson Ewell as a part of it again. Yanez is a part of the forward grouping, Jesus Ferreira. I mean, I see a lot of the names, and I see some of the younger guys coming up, and I'm intrigued about how they will be in this particular camp, and I want to see how they respond to this kind of stuff. But yes, to your point, the fact that you have these other teams who are active in CONCACAF Champions League, and they're okay with sending players out. It is for me, it is a question, and it's a bit of a head scratcher. Would like to hear what their coaches have to say about why they were released in the situation. But yeah, I think that, to your point about Sean Johnson as well, it's like, I think that keepers, and he's one of four, I think that's a part of the discussion there with this particular camp. The workload may not necessarily be as heavy as it would otherwise. But then you're also talking keepers whose workload by comparison with everybody else in front of them isn't necessarily as large as it is otherwise.
No, it's not workload. Workload doesn't really matter here because you're not working more in this camp than you would in your preseason camp. I would hope not. It's more about the chemistry and preparing for competition. I mean, these guys are preparing for a meaningless friendly, whereas Atlanta United, LAFC, Seattle, New York City, Montreal are all preparing for a competitive match 2.5 weeks after that Costa Rica game. So it's not just workload because, I mean, the somewhat good thing is that this camp will open on January 5th, so it opened like a week ahead of time. And if it was in the United States, then maybe you would let guys go for the first part of camp because then they'd be starting their preseason training a little bit early. But going halfway across the world to do that, there's just no real benefit. It's not a workload thing. It's a chemistry thing for the teams that are preparing for competition ahead of everybody else. And now they're going to be getting, these guys back. And for Seattle, 2 key players on the field. They're going to get them back probably on February 2nd after probably playing on the 1st. So the 2nd will be a travel day. 3rd would be more of a region day. You'll get back into training for the first time with your team on the 4th, and you're playing in 2 weeks. It's not ideal, and it's not necessary. That's the issue here is this game doesn't matter. This Costa Rica match doesn't matter in that sense. And if Greg Berhalter was looking at this to say, well, I don't want to call these guys back up because they didn't come into my January camp and I haven't seen them, well, then you're not doing your job because you shouldn't be calling up players just based off what they do with you in a camp. You should be calling up players in the best form. And if, it's Miles Robinson, if it's Christian Roldan, if it's somebody who hasn't been called up, period, who is in the best form, when those March matches come up, you call them up. You're calling up your best players. So we'll see. Looking at the roster real quick, goalkeepers, Bill Hamid, Sean Johnson, JT Marcinkowski, and Matt Turner. I'm assuming that Marcinkowski was the one who replaced Kazan. Defenders, Julian Araujo, Reggie Cannon, Chase Gasper, Justin Glad, Aaron Long, Mark McKenzie, Sam Vines, Walker Zimmerman. I like Sam Vines a lot on the left side for Colorado. I think Vines and Gasper will probably have a battle on that left side to see who gets the game against Costa Rica or if they split it 45 minutes apiece. We know what Aaron Long and Zimmerman bring to the table. I think we know what Reggie Cannon brings to the table at this point. It'll be an opportunity for Justin Glad to step up. Very inconsistent, and that's been, I think, a source of frustration for Real Salt Lake and for U.S. youth national teams. If he can give you a consistent performance as a center back, then you have another option. He's a good player on the ball. It's just the consistency hasn't been there. Mark McKenzie is a future national team center back. Is that future now? We'll find out. Midfield, Brendan Aronson. I'm glad he's part of this. Christian Kappas, want to see what you're going to get out of him. He's at Hobro in Denmark. Brian Kao is a player who I believe was going to sign with Orange County at one point, but I think he's waiting on a move to Europe. So stay tuned on where he ends up. Sebastian Leggett, Paxton Pomacall, Christian Roldan, Jackson Ewell, all guys that we've seen a good bit except for Pomacall, but we've seen him with the youth national teams. I think Pomacall might have the most to gain in 2020. I think he has a big opportunity to cement a role with both the national team and as one of the elite players in MLS. And we'll see if he can take that jump. Up top, the options are Paul Arriola, Jesus Ferreira, Jonathan Lewis, Uli Yanez, Jordan Morris, Jossie Zardes. Cool to see Yanez here after not being, contacted previously, and his father's tweeted about it. If he has an opportunity, if he's not playing at Wolfsburg, cool. bring him into this, and you see what he can do. Jesus Ferreira now has his citizenship. He had a really good year with Dallas last year. Want to see more from him. We know Areola, we know Zardes, we know Morris. They're all solid players at this level. I saw the usual consternation and just gnashing of teeth about Jossie Zardes. Look, without the players who would be ahead of him that are not going to be available here, and Josie Altidore is one who wasn't called up, assuming that the injury he had at the end of the season, they've decided not to call him up for this because of that. He's not there. Zardes is going to be one of the next in line. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If he's starting, World Cup games in 2022, we're having a different conversation, and probably people are injured. I don't think he is looked at as the first choice guy. I think with this group, he's one of the more veteran players, and he deserves the call up. Those are two separate conversations.
A couple of thoughts from folks this morning. Shiva wondered if this decision by Atlanta United may affect the national team coming after Atlanta United players in the future.
Well, if it does, that would be unbelievably short-sighted by Greg Berhalter. He should call up the best players, period. And if he tries to hold this against a Miles Robinson, against a Brad Gazan, against a Brooks Lennon, then he's going to be hurting the national team program over whatever perceived slight he's gotten with this. And that would be an awful thing for the national team program. It's tough for a Miles Robinson because he's a player trying to establish that he's at this level. I think his MLS performances last year established him as one of the best center backs that can represent the country, and he should get that call up. If he doesn't, there's going to start to be questions. There will. I don't know if people will question Brad Gazan not getting called up in the same way. I don't think it's fair, but people look at Zach Steffen as the number one, no questions asked, and there are other options. Brooks Lennon has to prove that he is at that level of a call-up. When it's not a January camp, it's a full national team camp. Brooks Lennon should also be part of the Olympic squad if that comes to play, and if he's released to go play in that, depending on where Atlanta United is at that point. I would be extremely disappointed if Berhalter took this as a personal offense and decided to not call up Atlanta United players who are deserving. And I think he'd be crushed in the media for it. I don't think he would really get anything out of it. Why would you keep talent out that would make your team better? Now, the trick on those players' side is to perform at a level with their club that makes it to where Berhalter has to call them up. And that's where you have to go with this.
Chris Hutchison is personally glad that we refused to release players to the USMNT after what Berhalter allowed/caused to happen to Miles Robinson. #Tuesday Thoughts.
I am too. I mean, not because of what happened previously, just because there's more important things for these players to be doing. If that hadn't happened, I think this is the right decision. That does probably make it an easier decision, sure. But if that hadn't happened, if everything had went fine with that camp, I still think this is the right decision. There's no reason to be calling these guys up when you have a CONCACAF Champions League to prepare for. That's why I'm blown away that the other teams are letting players go. And if things look disjointed for Seattle, in this competition in CONCACAF, you're going to have to look back at this.
Michael Head is also glad Atlanta United said no to the call-ups. Until the USMNT gets its house in order, keep our guys out of that mess. Meaningless camp for a meaningless match for an adrift program, no thanks.
There's some things that have nothing to do with it. The adrift program, the house in order stuff, look, that has nothing to do with the players. And the players who get that opportunity to represent their country, they don't really care about budgets, and they don't care about youth national team coaching staffs or anything like that. That's the part that you hate for a guy like Miles, you hate for a guy like Brooks, you hate for a guy like Brad, that they're not going to get the opportunity to do that here. I think they understand it. I'd be a little surprised if they're upset about this. But you hate that they miss that opportunity. So I would never say, like, just unilaterally, just don't allow them to play for the national team. I wouldn't say that, regardless of anything else going on with the program, because that stuff doesn't matter to the players, and it's not fair to hold it, and affect the players' opportunities because of it. This is because Atlanta United is their employer, and they're preparing for a competition, and they need all hands on deck. And they set the precedent with Barco, and now you've continued it with these three. It makes perfect sense to me. And a lot of clubs around the world do this. So that's why this January camp, it can be useful, especially for guys, and honestly, like a Brooks Lennon and like a Miles Robinson, although I think his play in MLS has surpassed this situation. But this camp can be useful for MLS players, for Scandinavian players who can represent the U.S., to break into the team, because most players aren't going to be available because this is not a FIFA date. It can be an opportunity, but it's still preparing for a meaningless friendly.
Kurt McGirt says he wouldn't trust the USMNT to watch his goldfish. Greg's Atlanta privileges have been revoked, and he can get no closer to Atlanta than Dalton.
I don't want to see this hurt the players' potential for national team call-ups later, and it shouldn't. And if Berhalter's smart, it won't. But yeah, I mean, that has to be part of it. I still don't think that's what makes the decision. I think the CONCACAF dates make the decision because you didn't let Barco go. If they had let Barco go to the Argentine U23s and then said no to this, then you would go back to what happened in October, and you could pretty much cite that. Because they didn't let any of them go, I think it's a different conversation. But yeah, he might not be allowed past Dalton. You might be right.
Well, and I'm sure that a couple of phone calls to the Georgia State Patrol could set up some roadblocks with some ID photos and things like that to make sure.
I don't think Berhalter's driving around. I would assume he's probably flying in, and there are Ubers or Lyfts going on.
Okay, well then every Uber and or Lyft will have a photo. Have you seen this man?
Don't think it works that way, John.
Stizzle A says, I am incredibly proud of Atlanta United for not releasing our players to the second-rate MNT. Their poor judgment last time cost us a cup final. # Tuesday Thoughts.
I disagree that it did. The defense wasn't the issue. I wish you had Miles Robinson for those games, but I disagree that it cost a cup final. That wasn't the problem in the Toronto game. Miles Robinson doesn't affect either of those goals that are allowed. I don't think that it was purely what happened in October for these players not being called up. Did it factor in? Probably. But I don't think that was only it. Because if it was, then Barco would have went to Argentina. I am happy that they're not going, because it should help prepare this team to be better in CONCACAF Champions League, which is very important.
So we've had a lot of folks fired up this morning. So suffice to say, they're fired up about keeping folks at home. So that's the early round of the conversation on that particular topic.
All right. Well, we'll get deeper into it as we go, and we also want you guys to chime in on your favorites of the decade. Favorite matches, favorite teams, favorite players, favorite moments. And it's not just Atlanta United related. It can be Atlanta, it can be MLS, it can be the women's national team, it can be the men's national team. It can be worldwide. Wherever you want to take it, it is just a broad conversation of favorite soccer things from the last decade. We're going to take a quick break and reset. We'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, December 31st, New Year's Eve, getting ready to celebrate 2020 and a new decade. I mean, it's crazy to look back at December 31st, 2009, and where MLS was, where soccer in Atlanta was. You didn't have professional soccer in Atlanta at this point 10 years ago. It didn't exist. The Silverbacks played their last professional game in the old USL First Division the end of the 2008 season. And then they went on hiatus. They didn't come back until very end of December in 2010 and started playing again in the 2011 season, the first of the new North American Soccer League. So you didn't have professional soccer in Atlanta 10 years ago, and now we're talking about professional teams in Atlanta refusing national team call-ups. Kind of cool. Kind of crazy. MLS was coming off of I think a big MLS Cup final where Real Salt Lake won their first in Seattle, neutral site against the Galaxy, David Beckham's first MLS Cup final. You'd had Seattle, kind of capture the league's attention to kick off 2009. You didn't have Portland and Vancouver in the league yet. You didn't have Montreal in the league yet. You didn't have Orlando, New York City, Atlanta, Minnesota, LAFC. You did have Chivas USA, though. You didn't have Cincinnati in the league. Cincinnati didn't have professional soccer 10 years ago. It's nuts. It's nuts how fast it's grown. And when you look 10 years down the road, you're going to be coming off of a World Cup. You're going to be maybe coming off of a Women's World Cup. And the landscape in 10 years, we could be looking back at it and be saying the same things. But man, everything felt so small. We were talking about national team call-ups and not sending guys to meaningless friendlies 10 years ago this time. It's nuts. It's nuts when you look back at it. And when I was looking back to do my list of matches and teams and players and moments, so much has happened over the last 10 years in the world of American soccer, let alone the world of soccer as a whole. I hope we're having the same conversation in 10 years. I hope we look back at it and say, man, it's hardly recognizable. I hope we get that opportunity. I hope we get to do that because I think we will. I think MLS will be in a very different place in 10 years. I think the game in this country will be in a very different place in 10 years. Can't wait to see it.
So are we saving our thoughts to the end of the show, or are we releasing them before that?
We'll save it for the end.
Okay. I didn't know if we were just letting everybody else have theirs first, or if we were going to put ours on the table first and then bring everybody else in. I wasn't aware of protocols.
We're going to get to all of it in the last half hour of the show.
Okay. Because Daniel Price has put in his idea this morning.
That's good. That's good. That's what it's there for. But This is just to get people going, get people thinking, let it marinate for about an hour.
right.
And then chime in. And again, for those of you guys out there listening and not able to join us live, please join the conversation when you get a chance to listen to this. If
Yes.
it is on the 31st, if it's before your New Year's Eve parties or what have you, cool. If it's tomorrow as you're recovering from your New Year's Eve parties, cool. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Let us know your best of the decade in any category you want to make up. There are some other bits of news and rumor to discuss. The Diego Alonso hire now official. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. So Miami has their man. Chicago has their man. New York City, still nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know what's going on with that. I saw that the New York City subreddit was kind of freaking out because the team hadn't tweeted in a few days. Don't know what's up with that. Maybe people were away on holidays or stuff, but you can't schedule some tweets, I guess. Don't know what's going on with the Pigeons. Really not sure what's happening there. Miami, what are your thoughts on Alonso? Are you happy about this? You think this is a good move?
I think it's a good move. I mean, I don't necessarily think that he was at the top of their list, but you consider his history and what he's been able to do in the hemisphere with the teams that he's had in Liga MX. And once again, you see someone in a Diego Alonso who has pedigree, who knows what it's like to be in these kinds of competitions. And that's what Inter Miami wants to do. They want to hit the ground running as best they can, as quickly as possible, so they can make their way into CONCACAF Champions League and any other competition that they can get their hands on that's MLS top level, hemispheric, whatever. So no, and now I want to see the kind of style that he wants to bring to the table, and with the resources that he has in hand, how it translates with what he wants to do.
Well, he had resources at Monterrey. He had more resources, so that part's honestly going to be about the same as it has been. The question for me is, can he get back to the form as a manager that won 2 CONCACAF Champions Leagues with different clubs? He's the only person to ever do that. The first part of the Apertura at Monterrey was awful, and that's what cost him his job, because Monterrey doesn't wait around for these situations. They have very high expectations. So Alonso's been available. I don't think he was the top of the list for Miami, but I do think he was on the list when he was let go in Monterrey. I think you're only doing your due diligence if he's to be on that list. I do believe, again, because you're doing your due diligence, if Carlo Ancelotti becomes available, you're going to make some inquiries. I believe the Gallardo inquiries were before Alonso was let go. I don't know if they were still talking to Gallardo after September. There's been conflicting things out of Argentina on that, but you have to go chase him. So as people came available, Patrick Vieira, I think, is somebody you would chase. There's nothing wrong with that. But Alonso is a really good manager to hire here. I think he's a really good fit. I think his knowledge of the game in this hemisphere is going to be big. I think his knowledge with being at big clubs with big expectations is going to be good. And eventually his knowledge of CONCACAF Champions League could be good for Miami if he can get him there. I think it's a good hire. Out of what was truly available and what opportunities Miami truly had in the hiring process, I think they ended up with about as good of a selection as they could have.
Yeah. And we've seen them fill out the roster over the last handful of days. And like I said, I want to see how, with the roster that is there and the names that now that he and Paul McDonough and the rest of the front office are going to be looking at to bring in for those big DPs, I'm looking forward to seeing those names being a part of the discussion and who they're going to be able to bring in and how they're going to integrate and see what Alonso wants to do with an on-the-field product.
So MLS announced their first generation Adidas signings 4 players, underclassmen that have come out of college early. They also announced 2 seniors that have already been signed to contracts. These will be top picks in the upcoming draft. Georgetown defender Dylan Nealis, Stanford defender Tanner Beeson. Those are the 2 seniors. You might recognize Nealis' name. He's the younger brother of Red Bulls center back Sean Nealis. The Generation Adidas guys, junior forward from Clemson, Robbie Robinson, Indiana sophomore defender Jack Mayer, Virginia junior center back Henry Kessler, and Syracuse sophomore midfielder Ryan Raposo. Robinson was the top goal scorer in Division I over at Clemson, 18 goals, 9 assists, 19 games. I'll be curious to see if he can make it as a number 9 in MLS. I wonder if that's where he'll end up settling or if he'll be pushed out into a wide position. It's a big jump. You know, we saw it with John Gallagher, for example. It was a big goal scorer at Notre Dame and a number 9 coming out of college. You look at the number 9s in this league. I mean, look in Atlanta at Joseph Martinez. Look at Bradley Wright Phillips and what he's done over the last decade. Zlatan, you know, there's so many. That's a huge jump. Robinson, I think, has the skills to be an MLS player, but I don't know if it's going to be as a true number 9. I think where you get the most value out of the draft is defensively. Defensively and in the holding midfield, because those are players who convert a little bit easier to MLS, but also those are players who face less competition for spots. You know, just like we've talked about with Miami. Miami has a solid defense, a solid midfield that's been constructed so far. Where are they going to spend their big money? Up top. The attacking players, the flair players. Those players coming out of college suffer. But the defenders, the holding midfielders, the box-to-box guys, defensive guys, they have a little bit easier road to get into playing time. And those are the guys that I'd be looking for out of this group. So your 2 defenders that are seniors, Nealis and Beeson, your sophomore defender from Indiana, Mayer, your junior center back from Virginia, Kessler. Those are the ones that I think have the most value in the Super Draft.
When it comes to Super Draft, where is Atlanta United in the draft order right now?
I don't have it in front of me just yet. It's going to be January 9th. It's a little bit different than previous years because it's not going to be at the United Soccer Coaches Convention. Atlanta's picking 23rd in the first round. Last year, their first-round pick at the end of the first round was Anderson Sayadu. Didn't stick. Spent some time with Atlanta United, too, before moving over to Birmingham. You're picking it around that kind of spot. So you're looking for a diamond in the rough. There's not really a position that you're looking for here. You might be looking for somebody more for Atlanta United, too. You might be looking for more of a project. It's tough to find somebody who's going to make an MLS impact at the end of the first round these days. It's very, very difficult. Inter Miami has 2 of the top 3 picks. I would be expecting them to look at these Generation Adidas guys because they're guys that won't affect their salary cap. They're guys that they can pick and then loan to their League One team and play most of 2020 there and see what they get. I think that's what they'll be looking for with those first 2 or 3 picks. For Atlanta, I think you're looking for a diamond in the rough or a project, and you're probably going to be looking at somebody who will play almost predominantly with Atlanta United too.
And that was why I asked, knowing where Atlanta United was going to be in the order, not necessarily, I had an idea, but not necessarily the specific number, what you would be chasing after down in the 20s to try to figure out what you would be looking for at that point. So that was why I was asking where they were in the draft order.
I mean, you look at the draft last year, and J.J. Williams for Columbus was picked 18. Chase Gasper for Minnesota, who's in the national team camp, was picked 15. after those two, Sean Nealis was picked 25, and the Red Bulls knew him because he came through their academy, I believe. Kamal Miller was picked at 27 for Orlando, Canadian international, good pickup there. Hassani Dotson, maybe one of the steals of the draft. Minnesota got him at 31. Reese Buckmaster was picked at 32 for New York. He signed an MLS deal late in the year. Looking for anybody else who had an impact at the professional level, the MLS level, and that's it. That's it. So there's not going to be a lot of options past the middle of the first round. I mean, look at last year's first round. Frankie Amaya, I think, was a different kind of player than I expected when I saw him play for Cincinnati. He's a little bit more of a box-to-box than a number 10, and that might be where he settles in at the professional level. I think he's got potential. Santiago Patino from Orlando, didn't really see much of him. Shin Yashiki, Colorado.
Yeah,
good player. I like Shin Yashiki. Tajon Buchanan, New England. There's talent there. Your namesake, John Nelson for Dallas, got some playing time. They liked him. He played for North Texas in League One as well. Gasper and Dotson, Minnesota are the team that got the A+ in the draft, with the number 15 and the number 31 that contributed a lot of minutes in 2019. So Minnesota won the draft with two guys. Few teams got anybody that really helped them.
And like I said, that was why I wanted to ask about diamonds in the rough and that kind of stuff when it comes to Super Draft and what folks are looking for. But yeah, with Inter Miami having two of the top three, then you're looking at guys that can help eventually, and if they can get things squared away and they're giving you some kind of minutes, then hey, you're dealing with house money at that point.
Yeah, the draft is not what it used to be. The level has improved so much. You want a bad take?
Hit me.
This is from the BBC's gossip section, so take that as you will. They have linked to Sport. I believe it is out of Spain.
Was this the one that I think it is?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is out of Spain. So Sport.es is reporting that Thierry Henry will be a contender to become Barcelona manager if current boss Ernesto Valverde leaves the club in 2020.
Okay. Right
I
on.
don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Agreed.
He really doesn't have a track record to be a Barcelona manager. I'm sorry. It's just not there. I don't know if he has a track record to be Montreal Impact manager, but that's a different conversation. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a take. That's
that is most certainly a take to end the year on.
that's some gossip. Man, what is it? It is. I mean, I don't know the time difference. It's what, 3-something in Spain right now.
Well, quarter to 3, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, it's 5.
Was this written like a few minutes ago? Could the drinks have already started flowing? I don't know. I'm looking to see what other things they have to say. So they talk a good bit about Henry. It says his departure from Impact Toronto is not expected to be excessively complex. Somebody might want to go tell them the difference between Montreal and Toronto. Just saying.
Oh.
That's just a typo. They did say Impact Montreal before that. So, oops.
Okay.
They talk about Henry's relationship with technical secretary Eric Abidal. They played together. They talk about Henry being in the team with Piqué, with Busquets, with Messi, the people he knows. He's an excellent ambassador of the club. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, all that sounds good. But if that's what Barcelona's looking for these days, Wow. One thing to keep in mind about Barcelona, and this is important. They don't make always the traditional hire. They're not always going for the person you would expect. So you go back to when Pep Guardiola was hired.
Right.
The two candidates were Jose Mourinho, who was coming off of at least a couple of Premier League titles and a Champions League title and a UEFA Cup title with Porto, and Pep Guardiola. Those were the final two. One had trophies. One had time with Barcelona B in the third division in Spain and got them promoted to the second division. And they went with Pep because he was a Barca guy and he was a Cruyff guy and he understood what Barcelona was all about. And with that crop of players coming through, he knew them. But that was he only had 1 year of managerial experience, and it was in the third division in Spain before taking the gig. They'll go outside the box, but this would be outside the factory.
Mm-hmm.
So, because he's not like a Barcelona guy through and through. I mean, he played there. That doesn't necessarily make you a Barca guy. I think Henry is probably far more connected with Arsenal than Barcelona.
Yeah.
Good job, Sport, in Spain.
Yeah.
That's getting everybody talking.
Yeah, that's that's outside the delivery truck that's leaving the factory for that one. That one's out there. Shiva has a question.
I'm not buying it. Okay, let's get to it.
Now that 2019 is almost over, what do you guys consider the most important thing that Atlanta United accomplished in 2019? And going into 2020, what would be the most important thing that they can accomplish?
Most important accomplishment of 2019 was winning Campeones Cup.
Yep.
I think it earned a level of respect in this hemisphere that MLS clubs have struggled for. That's important. I think that's the number one thing. What can they do in 2020? What should their goal be? Is that what the question is?
Going into 2020, what would be the most important thing they can accomplish?
CONCACAF. It's winning CONCACAF Champions League. I mean, from an accomplishment perspective, I'm generally always thinking on the field and trophies, and that's the big one that they don't have. They have the Open Cup. They have an MLS Cup. They don't have a supporter shield, but I don't think the supporter shield is as meaningful as it was 2 years ago. The schedule format really makes it more of a crapshoot. The CONCACAF Champions League is the biggest trophy out there that they don't have. And if they do that, then they would participate in the Club World Cup at the end of 2020. And how crazy would that be to be part of what Monterrey was just part of? So that's what's on the table for Atlanta United. I think more esoteric stuff. I mean, what you're looking for in 2020 is to continue to develop young talent. So you're looking for the breakthroughs of a guy like Bello. You're still looking for the breakthrough of a guy like Andrew Carlton. You're looking for the breakthroughs at Atlanta United 2 for a Jackson Conway. You're looking for the next George Campbell, the next player to come through the academy and truly be a product of the academy. And Campbell is that. Campbell was not a guy who people had on their radar when he joined Atlanta United's academy. He was not a guy who'd been part of youth national teams. He wasn't that group of, Carlton and Goslin when they were signed. He wasn't Patrick Okonkwo when he was signed. Okonkwo was a guy who had a big D1 offer for quite a while because he was scoring a lot of goals in the development academy. Campbell wasn't a starter when he joined the academy. And he's been not completely because he had a foundation already built, but he's been progressed by the academy more than anybody else. You need more of that, more of those guys. Who's going to be the next player like that to break through? That's the long-term, important things that I want to see the club continue to accomplish and accomplish in greater numbers. it's the thing that just takes time. I mean, you can't rush development, but that's a very important element of it. And if George Bello has the Miles Robinson season like he did in 2019, if Bello has that in 2020, that would be a huge step in this direction.
Tafka comes in this morning, says he has more coaching wins than Thierry Henry. Just saying.
I don't know if that's true. I'm going to have to go with this again.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Nah, I don't think you do, Tafka. Maybe...
There is a smirking emoji and a ha-ha associated with that.
I'm trying to see if this could actually have some kernel of truth. I don't remember Tafka's coaching level. I can't remember what age group it is that he's coaching at. I want to say it's U10. I might be wrong. There's probably a scale where you're comparing Ligue 1 wins to U10 wins, and might need a whole lot to equal. Might not be that far off. I don't know. I don't know how long Tafka's been coaching. If he's got, like 700.
You got your win-loss
U10
record
wins,
handy,
then,
Tafka?
Yeah, come on. If you're gonna sing it, bring it.
Yes, exactly. John Roper. Now, I did not see this article, so I know it exists, but I'm kind of flying blind here. He wanted to know if we saw the Just for Fun article that Joe Patrick wrote about possible LGP replacements, and what do you think of his picks?
I did. I went through it real quick. I'm trying to find it again. And is the website not updated? Let me find it through Joe. I don't know why Dirty South is not updated. For some reason, it's not updated for me. Okay, let me find it a different way. We're working on it. Give us a second. It's the last day of the year. We're not in our normal form.
Yeah.
Joe says... Here we go. He used Football Manager to identify some potential replacements. For those of you who don't know Football Manager, it's a computer game. You take over management of a team. It's not like a FIFA where you're playing games like a video game. It's much more of a simulation. So it's more accurate. There are like very small clubs in England who have used it as a scouting tool. They do employ scouts. I mean, they try to measure these players as best as they possibly can. It's not 100% accurate, but it can be a good base of knowledge. I mean, the players that are picked, somewhat, sure. I think they could fit. You can't necessarily look at these players and say, oh, yeah, they could sign this guy, and this guy, because you don't know agent relationships. You don't know salary demands. You don't know all the contract situations. You don't know track record with anybody in Frank DeBoer's staff or anybody in Atlanta United's front office. It's impossible to pick. But what I've tried to stress about this situation, if Leandro Gonzalez-Perez is sold and what you're looking for as a replacement, these are the types of players you're looking for. And I think the fact that you zeroed in on guys who are not necessarily first-choice players right now where they're at, because that's what Leandro was when he arrived here. He'd only had one season where he started 30 matches in a year, and that was at Tigre in Argentina. It wasn't the last season before he came here. It was the same with Franco Escobar. It's guys who have stepped up during their time in Atlanta. You can look for that in this type of move too. Maybe because you're in a different stature. Maybe because you could have more money to work with, more resources to work with. You could be looking at a higher stature of players, sure. But these are the types of guys. These are the types of values you're looking at. The Cameron Carter-Vickers one is the one that's got everybody's attention. And it's understandable. I mean, the Tottenham connection with Darren Eales, of course, that's going to grab your attention. He's a domestic player, so he wouldn't count as an international. That would help you when you're dealing with international slots. He's a player who has been up and down, and he's a player who has not broken through as of yet, but he's a player with a great CV that just hasn't translated to production on the field. Can he get past that? Could Atlanta be a place that allows him to get past that? I think he has the skill set. I think the one thing to look at, and the last player that was mentioned was one that I would not put his profile in, Leandro Vega, who is from Emelec. The reason why, it's because of Joe's description. Joe says he's a solid dual-winning center back, something Frank DeBoer may prefer over a more dynamic player at the position. I think you have that player in Miles Robinson. I don't think you want both of those players. I think you want somebody to complement Miles Robinson. And Miles is far better on the ball than he gets credit for. People still want to pull, criticisms from 2017 out at times on Miles. But he's not the player that you want making 60, 70 passes a game like LGP has. You need a player who can do that. So you have your dual-winning center back. I don't think you're looking for that. I think you're looking for somebody comfortable on the ball, comfortable who can hit that long ball and open the play up if needed. You're looking for that player. And can Cameron Carter-Vickers be that player? I don't know. But I think that's the type of player you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who has a skill set that's comparable to LGP, because that pairing of a ball-playing center back with Miles, who's going to win duels, who's going to have the speed, who's going to be able to outrun people, who can jump out of the building, you have that player already. You don't need two of them, because then that's going to limit the way you play. I think you want the ball-playing, passing center back with this move. Again, assuming the LGP deal goes down. As everybody has said, it's very close. Let's take a break, reset at the end of hour number 1. We'll be back with hour number 2 right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here, last show of 2019. We'll get into our matches, teams, players, moments, kits, whatever, of the decade in the last half hour. Jessica Charman will be joining us for that. We have some more Tuesday thoughts from the peeps, though. Let's get to it.
Now, do you want to get into a fight first, or do you want the other one?
Let's go with the other one. We'll save the fighting for a minute.
Okay. Sean Vergara. A while back, I remember seeing something about the Premier League, La Liga, and Serie A joining forces. Is that true?
No, I don't think it's true. I don't remember the details with this. It was Premier League, Serie A, and La Liga?
Yeah.
Let's see if anything comes up here. I don't remember anything about them joining forces. I do remember things about the top teams in all of them joining forces.
Like spinning off and doing their own thing.
Yeah, and it's going to be really hard to pull off. There is going to be more momentum for it, though, in the next decade. Because you look at the English Championship, you've got a number of teams that are potentially going to go out of business in the next decade. Like that's a reality. They're spending far more money than they have, and they're chasing Premier League TV money, and they're not getting to the Premier League, and that's only sustainable for so long. And then finding a billionaire or an oligarch or a sheik to come in and buy the team, there's not that many of those guys out there either. So the idea of managing a club in the way that so many championship teams have managed themselves, I think those days are going to end in the next decade. Because I think you're going to see a team that you would not expect go into administration or cease to exist in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I really think that's going to happen in England. That's not even getting into Italy and Spain and other countries where you're talking about first division teams that are in these conversations. It's a scary prospect for people who are traditionalists in the sport as to what the next decade looks like. If you told me that in 2029, 2030, you are watching a European Super League like you watch in basketball with the EuroLeague, I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think it will look like some of these teams have wanted it to look. I don't think they will pull out of domestic competition. I wonder if there's any way for it to look like things do in Brazil, where you have your state leagues and then you have your national league, and teams are playing a huge number of games, but they're big businesses that are bringing in huge amounts of money. I wonder if you get to something like that. I don't see UEFA, FIFA completely going along with a breakaway. Does the Super League just become an expanded Champions League where you're playing, instead of 6 group games or league games or regular season games, you're playing more like 12? Maybe. I think that's an easy step. It's going to be tough from a league scheduling standpoint. It's going to be something that these clubs are going to have to really navigate rosters and making sure that they can field teams in domestic competitions. But I think the way that happens is if you get into a situation, as has been proposed, where so many teams that are involved in this are guaranteed their spots in the expanded Champions League / Super League or whatever it ends up being. Because then the domestic league becomes less important. I don't know what the best answer is going to be. But I would expect the top teams are going to get tired of domestic competition that is not a challenge. And what have we seen in the top leagues in Europe over the last decade? Not a whole lot of different teams winning things, have we? Something's got to give.
Article in The Guardian, and there's a more recent article out there, but an article in The Guardian from about a year and a half ago with David Kahn. 19 of the 24 clubs in the championship a couple of years ago had losses. And that included Aston Villa, who had a $14 million loss, even though they had a £42 million parachute payment. So that's what you're staring at when it comes to the championship. You know, That ain't optimistic, and that was a couple of years ago.
I mean, in this decade in Italy, you've had 3 champions, and you haven't had one other than Juventus since 2011.
France, PSG, and everybody else.
Well, over the last 10 years, I don't know if that's the case, but recently, yes. England right now. I mean, the Premier League's done. Book it. Liverpool's got the title, and it's the first time they've won it in a while. They've been right there, but yes, it's done, and they've been competitive. Monaco won the title in France in 2017. PSG has won 6 of the last 7. Montpellier, Lille, and Marseille opened the decade with wins. So you've got 5 different teams there that have won. Okay. That's decent. What about the Bundesliga? Bayern has won it how many times in a row? A lot.
I was going to say 7 or 8.
Dortmund won in 12 and 11. Bayern won in 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 7 straight.
Yep.
Juve's won 8 straight in Italy. La Liga's been the most competitive, I think, among a smaller number of teams, but it hasn't had the Bayern or Juventus type of domination. So it's been Barca, Madrid, Atleti at the top of La Liga, but they've traded it a little bit more. Atleti's only got 1 title in the last decade, but Barca won the first 2, Madrid won 1, Barca won 1, Atleti won 1, Barca won 2 in a row, Madrid won another 1, Barca's won 2 in a row. Is that a great situation to be in? Not really. I don't think so. It's not what I enjoy about it when you compare it, and I know you're comparing different levels, but when you look at what MLS has had in the last decade, Colorado, 3 out of 4 for the Galaxy, Kansas City in 13, Portland, Seattle, Toronto, Atlanta, Seattle. Pretty diverse group. You've had lots of different finalists. You've had lots of competition to win the title. That's been a great fit for MLS. Is that something that these other leagues need? I think they do. I might be wrong.
Okay, next up, crazy prediction time or fighting?
Let's get into crazy prediction time, then we'll fight.
Okay. Waka Tata Flame. Okay, y'all, crazy prediction time. 3 trophies in a calendar year accomplished. How many trophies can Atlanta United get over the next decade with LAFC and Inter Miami joining the league? I'm thinking it gets even harder for anyone to gain a dynasty-type status in MLS.
Yeah, I think dynasty-like status in MLS looks completely different. I mean, your best 2 teams of the last decade, I think, are Seattle and the Galaxy. And I'll even edge it to Seattle over the Galaxy as the team of the decade, because along with winning 2 MLS Cups, they won multiple Open Cups, they won a Supporter Shield, and they always made the playoffs. The Galaxy won 3 of 4 MLS Cups early in the decade, then had a couple of bad years where they didn't even make the playoffs, and I don't think they were a title contender this past year either. So that's your team of the decade in MLS compared to a Juve and Bayern that's won 7, 8 titles in a row. It's going to be a different type of discussion about team of the decade. Now, I do wonder if MLS edges towards the La Liga type of conversation where in MLS it would be a larger number of teams, but there is a breakaway group at the top of the league. Is Atlanta, LAFC, Miami, Seattle, Toronto, are they going to kind of step a little bit away from the pack? I think the playoffs are going to always be the great equalizer in MLS. So you're going to get some of these teams that have a little bit of a lesser year go on a run in the playoffs. You're going to get lesser teams go on a run in the playoffs and win MLS Cup. I think that's overall good. But yeah, I think it's going to be harder to be a dynasty in MLS in the next decade than it was in the last decade, and I already think it's harder than any other league in the world.
Time to fight.
Okay.
Let the debate begin from John Nason. He's on Team Cristiano for this decade. The man just knows how to finish, left, right, head, whatever, when it matters most. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts.
John, you would be wrong. You would be wrong.
You just made the list!
Mm-hmm.
Lionel Messi's the player of the decade.
There you go.
579 goals. 579 goals scored. Club and country. La Liga play. 369 goals in 343 matches. Oh, yeah, by the way, leads all of the top leagues in Europe in assists as well. That's why he's the player of the decade. He's scoring more goals, and he is giving more assists, and he's... I think along Cristiano, where I'll give Ronaldo a ton of credit, is that he has changed his game from being a tricky, speedy winger to one of the most devastating number 9s we've ever seen in the game's history. And in any other decade, he'd be the player of the decade. But Messi has had a level of excellence, a number of trophies, both individual and team, and more variety to his game than anybody else I think we've seen in any decade, let alone this one. I think Messi's the player of the decade. And it's not to knock Ronaldo. I mean, any other decade, I think he's your player of the decade. But we're watching, I think, the greatest ever player over a career work right now. And now, I mean, you're seeing Messi become more of that creator for others. You're seeing him become more of a threat from set pieces, something that was never, necessarily in his wheelhouse before. You're seeing Messi evolve his game as he gets older. I think that's only going to continue. Like, it doesn't look like he's slowing down. Ronaldo, is he slowing down? That's debatable right now. Not by much, but I think he is slowing down a little bit. I don't think Messi's slowing down a bit. So I'm going to give it to Messi. Sorry, John. You're wrong. It's all good, though.
Eric Schwartz with an observation this morning. He says that the Aberdeen FC logo looks like the Big Chicken. Happy New Year, y'all. And he has photographic evidence to support his theory.
I mean, it kind of does. I don't think they knew about it when they made their logo. I hope not. Their logo, if I remember reading correctly, like, they weren't really a club with a true crest logo for a long time. I want to say going into the 80s, they didn't really have one established, like, crest. I think it's a far more recent development. I like it. And if they took inspiration from the Big Chicken, the longtime, landmark for traffic in Metro Atlanta, cool. I'm down with that.
Tafka's number for trophies in the upcoming decade is 12, is his guess. 2 MLS Cups.
That's way too optimistic.
2 MLS Cups, 2 Open Cups, a Campeones, 1 CONCACAF Champions League, 3 Conference Championships, 1 Leagues Cup, and 2 Supporter Shields. So 12.
Supporter Shields, I don't even care anymore. I really don't. And I think that's the least likely of Tafka's list, because I think being in all these other competitions, it's going to take away from the ability to win the Supporter Shield. So that's the one I would disagree with the most. if you include the conference titles, okay, that's a possible number. I wasn't thinking that. When I think trophies, and it's not knocking the conference trophy, it's just that doesn't really exist in other leagues to compare. I'm always looking at MLS Cup as the number 1, Open Cup as the number 2, Supporter Shield as the number 3 in domestic competition, Campeones Cup as the Super Cup type of competition with Mexico. Leagues Cup would be the other one that we'll see how that evolves over the next decade. And then CONCACAF and a Club World Cup are above and beyond and, out there in the ether.
So if we pulled Supporter Shield and just did MLS, Open Cup, Campeones, CONCACAF, Conference Championships, and Leagues Cup, that would put him at 10. That would put his number at 10.
Well, if he's keeping conference titles in, and I don't count those. That doesn't count
7.
as part of the trophy haul for me.
Okay, so 7 would be MLS, Open Cup, Campeones, CONCACAF, Leagues. So he was saying 7.
And that's still bold. I mean, I think MLS is not going to be as easy to win over the next decade because you add in Miami, you add in the other teams that are coming into the league, and you see Kansas City spending more. You see Vancouver spending more. You see Montreal taking it more seriously and I think trying to put a quality product on the field. You see Houston, I think, starting to get it right. You see Chicago starting to spend more. I think everybody's going to get better, so it's going to be more difficult. And just the MLS format, it has a degree of chance baked into it, unlike any other league in the world.
And let's see. It looks like everybody else on the timeline has predictions, best ofs, and all that kind of stuff.
Good times.
So that's where we are.
All right. Some rumors to keep in mind as we end 2019. Waiting on an announcement from the LA Galaxy. Kevin Baxter, the LA Times, is reporting that LA is about to sign Alexander Katai. You will remember him from the Chicago Fire. They're also close to a deal with Argentine left back Emiliano Insua, playing in Germany currently, and Peruvian center back Carlos Zambrano. They're in advanced negotiations there. Galaxy are getting very serious, especially on their defense here. So keep an eye on who they go get as their big number 9. That's the big question left. Some others, this was one that caught me by surprise a little bit. Peter Galindo of the Peruvian Waltz on Twitter. Goalkeeper Pedro Gallese, he is close to joining Orlando City. Reportedly rejected close to $1 million, including a $600,000 bonus from Alianza Lima before accepting the Orlando offer. Last year, he was on loan at Alianza from Veracruz. Now, Veracruz in Mexico kicked out of the league. I'm assuming that would nullify his contract and he would be available on a free. If that's the case, that's some smart business by Orlando City, isn't it?
Yep.
It's a good get. And they were okay at goalkeeper last year. I thought Brian Rowe was good. This is an upgrade. If he performs at the level that he has previously in his career, it's definitely an upgrade. Other rumors out there, another goalkeeper, Lester Groch of Univision in Houston, reporting that the Dynamo have agreed to terms with Croatian/Austrian youth international Marko Maric. 23 years old. He is on loan currently at Lillestrøm in Norway. He's under contract to Hoffenheim. He reportedly had interest from other French and German clubs. Philadelphia is still negotiating to try to get central midfielder Jamiro Montero on a permanent deal. They had him on loan. If they don't get him, they've got to replace him with a key player. I thought Montero was, outside of Shabilko, maybe their most effective player in 2019. So if you don't get him, you got to replace him with somebody who's going to be that important. San Lorenzo, we've talked about this player before, but now we're getting a club link to him. Diego Paulich of Diario Olé in Argentina, reporting that it's Inter Miami set to sign Argentine central midfielder Manuel Insaurralde. 20 years old. He's at San Lorenzo. He's part of the U20 national team for Argentina. He'd been linked with a move to an unnamed MLS team before, but it looks like the Herons are going to get him done. I really want that to stick, by the way. And if we have to try to drive that home, we're gonna. I saw somebody calling them the Flamingos, and then Forward Madison fans got all angry about it, but it's not a flamingo. The Miami logo doesn't have flamingos on it. Those are herons. Call them the Herons. Respect the bird.
Different bird.
It's a completely different bird. It's not the same bird. Other rumors. You've got a Nigerian center back, Stephen Easy, 6'6", reportedly out of contract, I guess tomorrow or at midnight in Bulgaria. He's at Lokomotiv Plovdiv. 25 years old, valued at just under $1 million. He has played for the Nigerian national team. Rumors of him coming to MLS, but not sure where. And there are teams that need center backs in the league. A 6'6" center back. Oof. See how that goes. LDU Quito is interested in signing Kansas City's Felipe Gutierrez, according to radio show La Red de Quito. That'd be a huge loss for Kansas City. It would have to be a big amount of money coming in for Peter Vermes to pull the trigger on that one. And I think they'd have to have somebody in mind to replace him. Gutierrez is critical to a Kansas City team that is now spending money, and you would expect to have, the ambition of winning everything in front of them this year.
Yeah, with all of this, I think Kansas City for me with Polito, and from that perspective, I'm looking at Sporting as one of the teams that I'm going to have in the spot shadow this upcoming season because of what Peter Vermes said in the offseason, what the front office is doing, who they're bringing in, and obviously last season being completely and totally unacceptable by their standards, and you're seeing how they're investing in the club this year. I'm looking forward to seeing what Sporting does. But, if LDU Quito gets Felipe Gutierrez, then, good on them, because once again, you're having MLS talent going outbound and garnering interest in other countries. And so I think it's just another cool thing, and it's another good step for the league.
Yeah, I mean, Gutierrez is a guy who's a known quantity in South America. He's a little different, but yes, I think clubs in South America looking to sign players from MLS, it goes to bolster that change in perception. And I think we'll continue to see that going forward. A couple other bits of news from around the soccer world. That Águilas Rayados match on Sunday, we thought the ratings would be big. 3.3 million viewers on Univision and TUDN, highest rated club match on U.S. television in 2019, highest rated Liga MX Apertura contest since 2016. Univision Networks, and that's including TUDN, they finished the year with 21 of the top highest rated 25 club matches with adults between the ages of 18 to 49.
Not a surprise.
I think it is a surprise to a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't pay attention to what's going on in the soccer world if it's not in English. And this should open a lot of people's eyes to that there's a whole nother world, and there are more people watching club matches in Spanish than in English in the United States. And that's important when you start to look at the soccer market, because that's going to inform how MLS grows. That's going to, you wonder why MLS wants to partner with Liga MX. Well, there you go. You wonder why Liga MX is wanting to do more in the United States. Well, there you go.
Yep.
It's a big deal. And I know that for a lot of people, the Premier League is the end-all, be-all for worldwide soccer. It's not the biggest league in the United States. Mexico is. And that's something that people have to keep in mind. I think paying attention to Liga MX is very important, and I do think it's important for Liga MX to now focus more on things in English, because I think there's a benefit for them to get it if they do it effectively. One last one before we take a break. Des Moines, Iowa looks to be getting a USL championship team in 2022. A proposed stadium is a step closer to reality. Investors closed on the purchase of a venue site, $7.98 million. It's an ownership group led by Kraus Group chairman and CEO and Des Moines Menace owner Kyle Kraus. They're hoping to start play in 2022, and that all depends on the stadium. But now they own the land for the stadium, so they're in a pretty good spot, huh?
Looking forward to seeing how that continues to develop as well, because that's one of the places where you like to see the continued growth of the game, and we've seen with Omaha how they're just jumping on board, and we've had folks from Union Omaha on the network, and if you want to listen to how things are growing there, you can go back into our archive and listen to that. But I think that there are those Midwest markets, and with the history of the Des Moines Menace being a part of the fabric there, I think that it's cool to see this next step, but obviously they're still a couple of years away, and they have things in their timeline and on their to-do list that have to be met for it to get there. But it's good that this next stage has been picked up as they continue to move things forward, and you just hope that for everyone who's a fan of the sport in the Midwest, we've seen what it can do in Minneapolis, and we're seeing hopefully what it can be in Omaha, that Des Moines is right there in the middle of all of that, and you're looking for the next step there as well.
All right, we'll get to the best of the decade with Jessica Charman joining us right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. Final segment of the year. Reasons. We brought in a guest for the final segment of the year as well, so we're going to talk about our favorite things, matches, teams, players, moments, kits, whatever, of the last decade with Jessica Charman. What's up, Jess?
Looking forward to 2020. It's a good last day of the year, and what better way to spend it than reliving some of the craziest, not all of mine are positive, they're just memorable games of the decade.
So what's your first game? When I threw the topic at you and I said matches of the decade, and I didn't want to pigeonhole it as like best, to then we're trying to quantify best, which is impossible. I wanted to go more with favorite. What was the first match that popped into mind for you?
Actually, it was Arsenal beating Reading 7-5 in 2012.
I wondered if that one would be on your list. I figured it would be.
Look, it wasn't good for me as a fan, but in terms of goals scored and in terms of an emotional roller coaster, that game really did have everything. And it's one of those when you have neutrals or people who feel indifferent about soccer that argue that there's not enough goals in it. Well, that one really kind of showed that sometimes things go crazy and sometimes there's absolute goal fests.
Talking of goal fests, the one that came to mind for me, I think it's on a lot of the best matches of the decade
Is it
list.
the Brazil?
Yeah, because it's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. The Germany-Brazil semifinal in 2014.
7-1.
Yeah.
The way it got to 7-1 too.
Yes.
It's just, I've never seen that match in a semifinal.
And that's what I was going to say. It's the level of the game that it's played. You expect those maybe in group stages of the World Cup when it's a team. You know, you look at the Women's World Cup. You expect the US to beat teams like Thailand by a lot of goals because of the difference in the history of soccer and the difference of the level of soccer. But when you look at Brazil, you look at Germany, on the men's side, these are two incredible soccer nations with history and two that you look at as being a close competitive game. And I don't think anyone could have predicted that. And if they did bet some juice boxes, I bet they got a lot of juice boxes back.
Nobody in the world put 7 on Germany on juice boxes. There's nobody. There's no way it happened.
All right. A couple that popped into my head, Jess, from the championship and the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
And I give NBC Sports full credit for laying this one out. My first one is obviously Manchester City QPR.
Yes, Aguero.
And Aguero. They said they've actually timed it out where if you go back, I think to like 11:56:20 or 11:56:40, and you play the match from that point at midnight, you hear Martin Tyler yelling Aguero.
What a way to send yourself into the new year.
So that was one. And then the other one for me from the championship was leg 2 promotion semifinal, Watford-Leicester.
Oh, the moment where they counterattack, right? They go for a corner kick. That one means a lot
misses
to me.
the PK, it gets saved. Then Watford comes down, counterattacks, scores in like the 97th minute to advance to the promotion final at Wembley.
Yeah, you don't even know how many times growing up I went to school in Watford, so the amount of times I had to watch that goal because of it being posted by friends continually. But, I mean, what an emotional roller coaster that was for the fans because Watford thought it was over. And it's one of those where you never expect a penalty to get saved in the end of the minute. It's kind of like the Kasper Schmeichel in the World Cup, right? When he saved one in stoppage time, the last men's World Cup, and then they went and lost on penalties. You never expect it. And those are the games that stand out to me, the ones that it's more about necessarily the feeling and the emotional roller coaster it puts the fan on, particularly as a neutral, over the actual quality of the game. And that's why I think some of the games that come up may not be the best quality of soccer, but they're the ones that really get the fans in their feelings.
I'll get one for you for feelings. The U.S. women 4-3 over Canada 2012 Olympic semifinal.
That's a good one. I was actually going to talk.
Ridiculous game I can ever remember watching. It had a 6-second infraction. I can't think of another one in the last decade.
No one. That doesn't get called.
No. And that got called here, and it had a huge factor. And they didn't score immediately from it. They had a handball that led to a penalty on that free kick, and then they scored. It was just an unbelievable game.
I don't think I've ever seen a 6-second actual infraction in professional soccer. I mean, I've had a couple of referees warn me for time wasting and stuff like that, but I've never seen it called, and I'm guessing it's an indirect free kick if it's called.
Yes. And it's something that I honestly can't think of another time it's been called. Now, the goalkeeper for Canada had been warned multiple times and was
she got a yellow card?
continually doing it. I think she had.
Yeah, so at that point, you're stupid, honestly.
Yeah, it was definitely pushing the envelope, but it's something you never see called.
No, you see it waved on at goal kicks, but the punt, the ball in the hands, you never see. So that one's a good one. And I think actually one of the best themes of the decade for me is the entire growth of the female game. And when you compare the different World Cups, and we ended with an absolute brilliant one at the end of the year, it's amazing how the women's game has developed. And maybe I think the level of female soccer was always there. Of course, with the professional training, the professional level, it's improved. But the media reception and the media coverage and the fact it's gone from being a sport that was once played on a red button or on, ESPN 3+ or whatever, the worst coverage could possibly be, to something that they're investing millions of dollars in, it is an incredible way to end this decade.
Yeah, I think one of the players of the decade had a hat trick in that game, and it was Christine Sinclair, a player that isn't going to get mentioned in this category very often, but carried Canada and carried the Portland Thorns as well in the NWSL. Sinclair's the greatest player ever from Canada, borderline one of the greatest ever players from CONCACAF, and had an incredible decade for Canada where they got to that level. And I think they've slipped a little bit now, but they got to that level, in the top 4 in the world.
Yeah, and for a nation like Canada that, maybe struggles in the women's game a little bit because they're so close to the United States, a lot of their players domestically would choose to go to the US, obviously. It was a sad way for Sinclair to end in the Women's World Cup, of course, but she's a player that stands out a mile when you look at role models and impressive players throughout the last 10 years.
Yeah, 183 career goals. I mean, it's just nuts. Carly Lloyd was my female player of the decade. I think the gold medal in 12, 2 World Cups, a golden ball, what she did in 2015, where her performance in the final, it's probably one of the best performances in a final ever. I think it's definitely one of the best performances in a final in the last decade. And over the whole of the decade, I think she's the player that is the figure of the U.S. women's national team from 2010 all the way through 2019.
Yeah, she's been the consistent one because a lot of the media now with the last World Cup, you do look at Rapinoe, you do look at Alex Morgan, but Lloyd kind of set the pathway for them. And Lloyd was the one that really still shows moments of class and moments of that you're just like, you can't believe her age. You can't believe how many years she's playing. And she's just got the highest soccer IQ that you see in female footballers a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the two on the women's side for me over the run of the decade, Lloyd and Sinclair. We've had the Messi-Ronaldo argument over player of the decade. Where do you fall?
It's a tough one. I like Messi more, just as me watching him play. I think that Ronaldo's more of the athlete in terms of he's kind of built like a Greek goddess or a Greek god. A Greek god. He's not a goddess, is he?
I might take offense.
It's been a long day already, but he is. He's been given every athletic, and obviously he's worked hard, don't get me wrong, but he was given every reason to be able to succeed in a sport. I feel like Messi at his height, at his size, kind of had so much going against him, and for him to develop as a player, it made him focus on his skill. It made him focus on having that low center of gravity. So I think his is almost a more impressive journey to be a professional soccer player. And
what other players stood out to you, John?
Well, I mean, you guys have gotten a good start. Are we talking internationally, domestically, what?
Wherever.
Everywhere.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm Team Messi as well for the decade. So that for me is an easy one. But you look at Sam Kerr on the women's side as another one of those players who has stood out for me. And, you look at, like, say, a Clint Dempsey at the beginning of the decade, Landon Donovan, those kinds of players domestically when it comes to national team play, that kind of stuff. That's who's been sticking out for me, at least early on.
Well, that's
in
the
an international
moment
sense.
for me, the Donovan goal in 2010. That is, from a United States soccer perspective, that's the moment of the decade. I mean, they opened it, and you wish there had been one since that would have matched it, but that's just such an unbelievable moment that, I'll never remember where I was. I'll never remember the reactions to it. It woke, I think, a country up to what the World Cup truly is. And it cemented Donovan's stature, and I think it just cemented that this was something that people really, truly care about. And all of those reaction videos and all of that was a big part of it. So that's my U.S. national team moment of the decade. I'll put that up there. That's the men's one for sure. On the women's one, it's the Wambach goal in 2011. Right. God, there's so many in that Canada match in 2012. The Lloyd goal from near midfield in 15. Yep. But the Donovan one on the men's side, that's really it.
Yeah, there hasn't been too much wonderful moments for the U.S. men's national team, has there, really?
Sadly, yes. You want one of my other matches of the decade, following along that type of attitude? Iceland 2, England 1, Euro 2016.
Yes.
Look, I thought that might come up on it, but it was, you know what?
It's a huge
It was
match.
almost a blessing to England as fans too, because it was a reality check.
Yep.
You talk about these things we've talked about it before so many times about how England is a nation that puts so much pressure on their players and always has such high expectations. As we look ahead to the Euros next year, it's the same deal. This is our year, this is the time. And it was one of those where we had the quality. There was no way a nation like Iceland should have upset us. You compare the stats, you compare the level that these players are playing, but Iceland had a game plan. Iceland played well. And they fought, and England was just garbage, to put it quite frankly. But it was a wake-up call, and England's been a different team really ever since. And it's one of those where it's a game where if you're a neutral or if you're an American and you're watching, you kind of want the underdog to win. And I understand that as soccer fans, if you're not rooting for a team, oftentimes we side with the underdog. And that was one of the greatest underdog upsets of the decade, really.
All right, before we get into the Twitter timeline, let's talk about the best teams of the decade. And I kind of looked at it. I mean, if you want to take it over a multi-year span, that's cool too. I kind of pulled some individual years out. And for the European teams, I pulled the year that was the end of that season. So like Manchester City last season, the incredible season that they had. You could even take the last two seasons under Pep Guardiola. I had Inter Milan in 2010, Mourinho's year at Inter where they did the treble. They won Champions League. They won Serie A. Just an unbelievably organized team. I think Leicester in 2016 is one that will be remembered from the decade.
That was the one. Yep, that was my one. Because maybe they weren't the best team in terms of they weren't world beaters. They're not the Liverpool of 2019. But for a team to win the Premier League, like Leicester, and that's not to be disrespectful, and they've really solidified themselves this year. They're doing impressively as well. They're solidifying themselves as a top half of the table Premier League team, but at the time, no one thought much of Leicester, and there was Gary Lineker lost a bet and had to present match of the day in his underpants because he never believed Leicester was going to win, and for a team to do that, it's a remarkable feat. And actually, that's why Jamie Vardy is one of my top players of the decade, because he has no right to be scoring these goals in the Premier League. He has no, if you'd have looked at him 10 years ago, no one would have expected him to be scoring consistently week in, week out in the Premier League. But here he is, and it's that kind of fight and that kind of spirit as a player and overcoming hurdles and not giving up. There's players that weren't playing in good leagues 10 years ago, and now they are. And I think that's the beauty of the game. And it actually makes you wonder how many players are kind of slipping under the radar and not getting spotted that might have the potential of a player like Vardy.
Absolutely. The team of the decade for me was Barcelona, the 2011 team, the one that beat Manchester United at Wembley in the Champions League final, where Sir Alex Ferguson said it was the best team he had ever been against. Just ran them off the field at Wembley. That was, I think, it's hard to say Messi at his peak, but Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, that group was just incredible. They were a machine. And I think by that point you were 3 years in with Pep, and it was clockwork. I mean, that team was incredible. The other two on the domestic side, the North Carolina Courage of 2018, where they won everything. They won the International Champions Cup. They won the Shield. They won the league. They were just a wrecking ball in 2018. They were pretty close to that in 2019, but the 18 team was even better. And in MLS, it's Toronto, 2017. A treble, you have to respect it. And that was the most well-rounded team, in my opinion.
I think those are great ones. And I do agree with the NC one. I think that it's insane how they've become such a powerhouse in women's soccer over here. But you do have to say that the 2018 was more successful than 2019, but they're darn close as well.
Yeah, it's really, really close. What are the peeps saying on Twitter, John?
Daniel Price, first in the barn this morning. He says, Happy New Year's to everyone in the SDH verse. I guess that's the official title. It's an SDH verse. Favorite match, MLS Cup. Favorite player, the father. His favorite moment. Cheering for Parkey for his last regular season match. Favorite team, yes. And favorite podcast is this one.
Oh.
So when it comes to Atlanta United, I mean, the 18 team, I think, is the one that will go down because of the first MLS Cup. I think that's an obvious one. That's a really underrated moment. The Parkhurst reception on decision day. That's one that I honestly didn't think about when I was thinking of these kinds of moments. But yeah, it was goosebumps completely.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris Ashley. His favorite match. April 6, 2019, the Greenville Triumph and Lansing Ignite in the first home match in team history, the start of something special. His team is the at GVL Triumph. I mean, come on. His favorite player is Dempsey. Favorite moment being at the Benz for MLS Cup 2018. I will never forget that moment. Honorable mention moment being in Texas for the inaugural at USL League One final. Had things gone the other way, this may have leapfrogged the MLS Cup for him.
But that's what local's all about, you know? And I think that's what's unique maybe about soccer in this country, Jess, is you have the Greenville Triumph and Atlanta United that operate in different universes in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I think it's awesome that you have people who are emotionally invested in both.
No, I agree. In England, you sort of grow up and you're told if you care about two teams, you're not a real fan. You know, there's a lot of pressure on you. You can't have a Premier League team and a Championship team. You have to have just your team.
That's kind of sad.
What I think is it's beautiful here that you can appreciate different leagues and stay invested in them, because at the end of the day, yes, it's fun watching soccer games as neutrals. I could watch every game going on Boxing Day. I watched too many soccer games. It was a bit disgusting.
No such thing.
But I don't know, man, when your brain starts working like mine did. But I think it's a really amazing thing here that you can be invested in so many different leagues, and you can have a USL 2 team that's local to you. You can have a USL 1 team. You can have your MLS team. You can have your European team, and that's okay. And it's kind of expected. People ask you, hey, but what's your team over across the pond? What's your team here? And it actually really helps people develop as a soccer fan, because you get to learn these different things. You get exposure to different things. And it just creates more well-rounded, even people that can enjoy games at different levels. And it's so important for these smaller teams to have fan bases. I think a lot of the time in Europe, when teams start to get relegated, yes, they have their fans, but the attendance figures drop completely. What's impressive in America is that a lot of these small teams end up having big backings, even the college teams, because it's about being from where you're from.
Also on the board, Shiva with a compliment, if I may steal a favorite from @Daniel Price, ATL. SDH has to be our favorite podcast of the year. You guys do an amazing job covering soccer in all aspects, keeping us entertained on and off season. Wishing you all a New Year. Can't wait for 2020.
Thanks, Shiva.
Nathan Pugh. Since MLS didn't exist before Uncle Arthur, his favorite match was the Rev Wedding because he got a free burrito.
That nearly made my list. That was really close because I was thinking back to like the matches of each year with Atlanta United. Gwen loved the Rev Wedding, by the way.
Yes.
The 2017 match that edged it for me was the last game at Bobby Dodd, the Orlando 1-1. I think some of it because it was the last game at Bobby Dodd and Villalba getting that goal at the very end to get a point. That was my 2017 match. 2018, it was the first leg of the Eastern Conference Final against Red Bulls at home, and Campeones Cup in 2019. Those were the games of each year that I really remember.
I loved Bobby Dodd. Honestly, I thought there was something really special about Bobby Dodd, from the tailgate to the smaller atmosphere, and it just reminded me the outside soccer stadium. It was just something really special with the city in the background too, and the Mercedes-Benz is the most incredible stadium I've ever been in. But there was just something about the spirit of Bobby Dodd that I think we miss, and I'm very grateful that I got to experience so many games in that ground, because that'll be something I always hold with me.
Yeah, it was very cool to be part of games there. It had a different feel. I think when the Benz gets going, it's amazing, and it surpasses anything. But Bobby Dodd, the city in the background added an element to it. It really did. The only time it kind of echoes that is when the roof is open at the Benz, when you get that just open feeling of it. And, those afternoon games when it's like that and you can see the city through the window and that type of stuff. It's very cool. But there were some really special moments at Bobby Dodd that'll go down in the club's history.
Yeah, Miggy Hop is another one of those that comes to mind at Bobby Dodd. To finish up, Nathan Pugh's favorite team, Atlanta United. Favorite players, Joseph. And his favorite moment was when Will Johnson went absolutely insane when he dove and didn't get the foul.
Yeah, the memes that followed that one, they were good.
That was incredible. I've never seen a team in all the years I've been watching this game melt down emotionally like Orlando did during that match. I mean, it started early. It wasn't even just at the very end. It was going on random, whistles blown in the 10th minute. Like, it just felt like that game was way too big for Orlando. And you get to that point where watching it live, I was pretty sure it was a dive. I definitely thought it was exaggerated, and I was pretty sure that it was just a complete fabrication. And in seeing his reaction to it, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, he took a bad dive. What is he doing? And then he just kept going, and then everybody started throwing stuff, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's one of those where, when that happens in like an adult league and people start yelling at each other, you're like, you've got in their heads. You expect that in an adult league or something like that. But this is a professional soccer game, and it was just insane to see the lack of composure and lack of professionalism of the players. It's one of those where you can be mad, you can be disappointed, you can be frustrated, but to let everyone see that, that's never going to work in your favor.
No, not at all.
John Roper's favorite moment of the last year was Michael Parkhurst's tackle to spring Joseph in the final.
Yeah, another underrated element. Perfectly read, and as he said in the MLS documentary, they had done the research and the analysis of it, and he knew which direction Abobasi was going to turn. He took a heavy touch, and Parkhurst was already anticipating it before the heavy touch, and that's what created it.
Also on the board for John, his favorite soccer moment of the decade, Landon Donovan's goal against Algeria 2010. I jumped off my couch and hugged everyone in the room.
The other moments I had on my list that we haven't talked about, the Luis Suarez handball against Ghana in the quarterfinals in 2010. Because it's one that so many people, I mean, look, there's a million different things to be mad at Luis Suarez about, but people get really mad about that one when I praise him for that. He got punished. He got the red card. He got suspended from the semifinal. But if he doesn't do that, they're out.
And that's what I think. Sometimes people critique players for stuff that's actually very smart gameplay. There's one thing biting people. There's one thing throwing a punch, a headbutt. Those sort of malicious plays where it's, a straight red card for aggression, that's different. Any player that stoops to the level where they punch another player, to me, that deserves all the criticism in the world. But when they make a conscious decision in a split second to react like that, that's not easy. It's not even easy as a goalkeeper to make those sort of saves. Right. But as a player, to come to your senses that, you know what, I need to take this risk. I need to do this because there's a better chance of my goalkeeper saving a penalty than there is of, us coming back or us scoring another goal.
Yeah,
it's
with
a
no time.
Very clever play. And so for me, I don't think you criticize a player for that. I think you actually shows great awareness of the game. Yes, is it cheating? Potentially. But do you get a red card? Yes. Do you get suspended afterwards? Yes. It's punishment for punishment. And it's really, to me, no different to a goalkeeper who makes a decision in the last minute when they're in a one-on-one. They know they're not going to save it, and they chop down the legs of the player. Yeah. But you don't see goalkeepers getting a hard time for that, or you don't see defenders getting a hard time for dragging back someone's jersey when they know they've got no chance. But it's the same gamesmanship. It's just that people aren't used to seeing players handball it so blatantly.
Yeah, I don't know if cheating's the right word for it. Because, I mean, it's a foul, and he's punished. He didn't get away with anything. So
three-dimensional creativity.
It's just recognizing the situation and
amazing athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, all of it to be able to make that play in that moment. He took them to a semifinal. He gave them another chance to continue in the tournament. I mean, if Ghana converts the penalty, which happens 8 out of 10 times, then we're not even talking about it. So that was one of those moments that got a lot of people talking. The other one that I'd kind of forgotten about was the Robin van Persie goal in 2014 for the Netherlands against Spain, where it kind of started that was the end of the Spanish dynasty, where they had won 2 European championships, they had won the World Cup. They go into this match and just got blitzed. And that Van Persie goal is one of the most impressive goals I've ever seen, because it's a long ball, kind of over the top, and he hits a diving header that is just
that's a header, right?
Unique. It's such a unique header. That was a huge moment and a shock, because Spain was not seen as vulnerable just yet.
No, it's the air. I'm just looking at it, watching it right now.
It's crazy.
The ball is what makes it, obviously. The ball and the run is insane, because the ball is in that zone where the goalkeeper can't come, but he's stuck in no man's land. But the absolute athleticism, and those are the goals that for me are just incredible. When a player demonstrates not only skill but athleticism, it's just insane. There's diving headers from 5 yards out which look cool, but a diving header from the penalty spot, there's nothing really like that.
No, I've never seen anything like that one. That was a cool one to go back to look at, and I think it's the Dutch commentary of it. If you can find it, it's an outstanding call to hear. Go find it if you can.
John Roper adds his match of March 5, 2017 at Bobby Dodd. Even though it was a loss, it was an amazing night. Jason Andrews. Aside from all things Atlanta United, one of his top soccer moments of the decade was watching Dempsey's go-ahead goal versus Portugal in the 2014 group stage at Brewhouse in Little 5 Points. The moment was incredible.
Yeah, for me, the one from that World Cup I remember is the Brooks goal against Ghana, and watching that at Diesel in Virginia Highland, and people just lost their minds. I mean, because it's a moment that you're supposed to lose your mind to. It was one of those, and we haven't had a ton of these for the U.S. men's national team. I mean, those were both big. They don't beat the Donovan one for me, but they're on the list.
But I do think...
Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, I was going to say that something for me that was very special. I moved here in 2013. I think I went to Brewhouse for the first time in 2014, was experiencing my first Premier League morning in America, because you're so often conditioned to think that Americans don't care about soccer or there isn't this fandom. And just walking into a place like Brewhouse and seeing it packed at 7:30 a.m., that was just mind-blowing for me. And it really, it just opened my eyes, though. And that's the beautiful thing. And now I would say that I am a huge protector of Americans when it comes to English people talking about Americans and soccer. So that one was a very special moment for me, just watching my first Premier League morning stateside.
Tafka's personal decade list, the greatest ending to a match, Watford-Leicester City 2013. Greatest moment, first goal of Atlanta United. It honestly makes me tear up. Favorite player, Almiron, don't at me. Best game, Atlanta United Red Bull Conference Finals, don't at me.
No, at him, first off, but he's correct. From Atlanta United's perspective, I mean, it's hard not to say Joseph for what he did, what he's done in 3 years here. But Miguel just is somebody that you'll remember for what he did. Like, I'll think of that Houston game at Bobby Dodd in 2017 where he kind of just took it over. And I'll think of other moments in matches. The free kick, was it against Red Bulls or was it against New York City in the playoffs last year? Perfect free kick. And it wasn't something that we ordinarily saw from him.
I'm trying to remember.
Doesn't matter. What else do we have on Twitter?
At Frank Mero. U.S. versus Costa Rica, October 2009. U.S. down to 10 men with an injury, ties it at 90+5 to advance to the World Cup.
You could include
2.
that in the decade.
Hey,
People have been arguing.
2009 isn't the decade.
Yeah, I would leave it out. I was going 2010 to 2019. That was a cool moment, though.
Number 2, the TIFO at the Atlanta Red Bulls Conference Finals.
Is that the Apple?
No, the conference final one was the full stadium foil TIFO.
Oh, yeah, that was your TIFOs in America are just insane in general.
And his number 3 used to be Miggy, but now it's Joseph.
It's going to be interesting when we look back at this in 10 years, and you know you're further removed from it, how players are remembered, because you know this is only going into year 4 in 2020. It's a very short history, so I mean I understand the warm feelings for players who are here for a year or two, and I think Miggy's going to be special regardless, but. Mm-hmm. In 10 years, it's going to be really different because then you're going to have lots of different players to talk about, lots of different seasons to talk about. Yep. It's going to feel very different.
And that's something that is very unique right now to Atlanta United. And that's why I never mean to come across as harsh. But I guess when you grow up, particularly for me, supporting a team where we relied on a lot of loan players, there was such a high level of turnover that, yes, you fall in love with a player for a season and you feel very strongly in favor of them and you want them to do well, but you kind of get used to that turnover. And I think it's going to be something that, particularly for fans who may be newer to the game, that aren't used to that at first, it's hard and you want to follow your players, but soon enough, sadly, the revolving turnstile that is, you know, soccer transfer windows will become something that you get more used to and you'll wish the player the best. And then, you know, maybe you'll clap them if they go for a transfer in the league and you hope they have a good career, but it's not something that then you start following or buying jerseys of that team anymore.
Yeah, I think it's something where it's one thing if they leave the league, you know, like following, you know, Miggy at Newcastle is very cool. And, you know, for Atlanta fans who, especially fans who are new to the game, don't have any attachment to teams in England, cool, it might introduce them to something new and a team that, you know, Saturday mornings are going to watch and see how Miggy's doing. They'll get to know other players. And I think when we see players like Leandro Gonzalez-Perez potentially going to Mexico, you'll see Atlanta fans watch Xolos more. That's cool. I think those things are good. It's just part of the process. I mean, it's something that, you know, growing up without MLS teams nearby when players from Manchester United, who I saw the most and have been a fan of, like when they'd go to Real Madrid, like Beckham. I didn't follow Spain. I didn't have access to the Spanish league. So when Beckham goes to Madrid, I'm going to watch Real Madrid because I want to see David Beckham play as one of my favorite players. And you start to learn more about the game around the world. It's a good thing.
Jared has chimed in this morning.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
His goal is the Donovan goal. You know the one.
Okay.
Favorite match. England and Colombia. So much chaos, and England wins a PK in a big moment.
Lord, I watched that game. You don't even understand. I watched that in a room with 7 Colombians. I don't know if Sebastian wanted to talk to me for a week. It was one of those, again, we talked earlier in the show about the emotional roller coasters. And you don't understand as an English person how conditioned you are that a penalty shootout equals failure. You know, even for me being young and missing, you know, I haven't been around for all of the penalty shootouts, but it's something you've grown up conditioned to hear that we're going to struggle when it comes to penalties. So for me, the emotional roller coaster was thinking it was all over, thinking we were through, then heartbreak when the goal was scored, and then as it went to penalties, thinking it was over, going behind on penalties and then going ahead on penalties. It was an insane game. And you got to think, particularly in Atlanta now, there's such a big following when it comes to Colombia. There was so much atmosphere around that game and so much build-up. It was just an unbelievably crazy game day. And I think both teams, Colombia and England, knew that whoever came out top in that game had a really nice path to potentially getting further than before in a World Cup.
Absolutely. It's one of the spectacles of the decade for sure.
His favorite performance, Jarrett, was the Forlan World Cup, and his favorite moment was watching Portland players back off the press at the end of MLS Cup, the moment where you could relax.
The Forlan 2010 World Cup is a really good call. That's maybe, I'm trying to think, in this decade, the 3 men's World Cups and the women's World Cups. That might be the most impressive World Cup performance from an individual. Forlan carried Uruguay in 2010. Just absolutely put them on his back. Now, he had some help. Luis Suarez was coming into his own at that time, and he had others, but Forlan was incredible in that tournament.
Also on the board, you've got Joe Bost, who wishes us a good morning. He says his favorite match and moment, 2019 versus the Galaxy, seeing little man's face when he realized he was escorting Joseph onto the field.
Aww.
His favorite player is the ostrich, and then a laughing, crying emoji. His favorite radio duo, and he has 2 goats emojis for both you and Mike Conti. His favorite podcast, Happy New Year to all.
Y'all are funny. Y'all are awesome.
Tafka has been to Miami. He said that you could have easily have used a peacock as the interbird of choice. Ha ha.
No, it's not on the logo. The logo is very specific. They are herons. They didn't put peacocks on the logo. They didn't put flamingos on the logo. Miami will be known as the herons. That's what we're going to call them, and we're going to make this happen.
Are there herons? Herons a common bird?
Yeah.
In America?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, in the warmer climes like South Florida, yes.
Okay. We have herons in England. It's not warm.
They probably went to Miami because they didn't want to be cold anymore.
There you go.
That's what commonly happens.
We have a question outside of top decade stuff.
Okay.
AA5 Stripes wants to know what's the potential total number of matches for Atlanta United compared to other MLS clubs not in CONCACAF Champions League.
Okay. Potential total number of matches. You've got the 34 in league play. If you don't win the conference and you have to go through the first round of the playoffs, you'd have that. You'd have a conference semi. You'd have a conference final. You have a final. So that's 4 more. So that's 38. You would have, I think, 5 rounds of Open Cup, if that's the same. I think it is. So that'd be 43. And if you go all the way through CONCACAF Champions League, you'd have 8 matches there.
So 51 is the absolute max. Because you don't have Campiones Cup, you're not going to have Leagues Cup, you're not going to have anything else. So 51 competitive matches is the absolute max.
And there's your math for the morning. Jarrett's other choice for match of the decade was Celtic-Barca, where Fraser Forster became a god for 90 minutes and Tony Watt sunk Barca at 18 years old.
I was waiting for a Celtic reference from Jarrett.
And Jarrett has the photographic evidence of Fraser Forster. Xavi gushed about him, stood on his head in a Tim Howard way. Katie Weaver, best decade moments. Women's national team versus Brazil. Pino to Wambach and Lucas Moura completing a Spurs comeback at the death in the Champions League semi. Scenes. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts.
The other moments I had that we have not talked about, too. Andres Iniesta's goal to win the World Cup in 2010 for Spain. I mean, it's their first World Cup win. It was in extra time. They were getting punted all over the field by the Netherlands in that match. De Jong's karate kicking guys in the chest, and they somehow won. And one that I had completely forgotten about, looking back at the goals of the decade, the Ronaldo bicycle kick in the quarterfinals of the Champions League in 18 for Madrid against Juventus. It's one of the best goals I've ever seen.
That's the athleticism we talked about there. You know, he's gifted with everything that makes that possible, and he works hard. And goals like that don't come without hard work and athleticism. And I just think sometimes, you know, when you're watching TV and you see a goal and you're like, well, maybe I could score a goal like that. But that's the sort of goal that you look at and you're like, there is no way I would be able to get my body in that position in 100 years, ever.
Daniel Price is yelling at me. He says I'm lying because, yes, if they won CONCACAF, then you would have Club World Cup matches in 2020 to add to that, and they would have 3 maximum. So 54 is the absolute maximum potential matches for Atlanta United in 2020.
El Mataflow, favorite players of the decade. Luis Antonio Valencia, Luis Suarez, Ray Joseph. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts. Happy New Year, guys, and thanks.
Like it.
Tafka, when we got into the discussion about creative red cards, he says, in basketball, you foul to prevent a basket, and after 5, you're gone. It's the same concept here. I'm cool with it. It's next-level awareness of the cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly. And that's so difficult at the speed of the game. It's like the times where people criticize a goalkeeper when they foul and get red carded early on in the game. So many times we talk about how, well, they should have just let them score. They should have just let them pass. And then they'd have 11 players and the goalie would be on the pitch still. It's not that easy. The speed of the game and the heart and the feeling and the emotions you have, your brain is going, you know, at 2,000 miles an hour. So to be able to slow down and make a potentially rational decision, that's what's impressive.
Yeah, you can't think that way, and to be able to do it is pretty impressive. That's why I was, you know, impressed by that moment, not angry about that moment.
Tafka, in his admissions for Miggy, he says he's a creator, not a scorer. I appreciate the Almiron skill sets more so than Joseph, though both are outstanding and scoring is obviously super important. Although Miggy was a watershed moment for the club and league, and his personality was infectious. And, yes, Daniel Price, he's glad he can cause you stress here on the last day of the year.
Yeah. Good job, Daniel. All right.
We're caught up.
Ask you guys, okay, since we're done with Twitter, to close out, what is one thing that you are hoping we're talking about in the next decade in the sport?
Jess, ladies first.
Women's football continuously, or women's soccer, I should say, continuously, not just as a side thought or an extra addition. And I think it's getting there. And I hope that NWSL and the Women's Super League is something that everyone's talking about, and mainstream reporters. Obviously, you want specialists, but it would be really cool if it was part of mainstream news and mainstream sports news rather than just an afterthought, which you guys obviously do a fantastic job. But all too often, it's a side note, not a headline.
Yeah, it's something I've really tried to condition myself to. I mean, you think about it. So you have the World Cup, right? And then you have the Women's World Cup. It's the Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup, or it's the World Cup, period. I've definitely gotten in the habit, and a lot of it's from the acronyms that are what you normally refer to the teams by, but I think I almost always say the U.S. men's national team and the U.S. women's national team. Mm-hmm. It's just what's happened. It's not the U.S. national team and the U.S. women's national team. It's you're going to do you're either going to identify them by gender or you're not going to identify them by gender at all. It's part of the conversation. And when we're talking about great World Cup moments, the Women's World Cup moments have to be part of that conversation because we're talking about World Cups. I think this is the sport that is unique in that they can be on equal footing. And I hope that people who are talking about the game talk about it in the same way because there's no reason not to.
And stop asking for smaller goals.
Says the keeper of the show.
I'll take a smaller field before I'll take a smaller goal, and not by a lot, just at the bottom edge of the FIFA regulations.
I'll take that. That's okay, Jason. You can say that.
I'm not a huge fan of it, but if you wanted to go, like, for example, a 70-yard wide field is going to play better in a women's match than it is in a men's match. I think it just is, and that's still in the FIFA regulations. That's still okay. I'm okay with that, but smaller goal, no, that's stupid.
For me, it is the continued growth of the game and have it be on solid economic footing in these markets. We talked about Iowa as a place earlier in the show that is hoping to have USL Championship. I want to continue to see rising tide. I want to see League One grow. I want to see USL, I want to see the USL grow, and I want it to be on solid economic footing. I don't want it to be, sadly, in a situation like we saw in League One with Lansing. I want solid franchises, and if you have MLS second teams as a part of this to where it's all a part of the growth of the game, then I'm cool with it, but I just want solid economic footing for folks that want to dip their toe in the pool and be serious about it and understand what it means, not just to the league that you're in and to your fellow business owners, but to the communities that you're impacting by doing a one and done. So that's, I want to continue to see success stories like we're seeing in Statesboro and in Greenville with two franchises in separate leagues and places like Charleston and all of this. So, and New Mexico, all of these places where 5 or 10 years ago, you didn't sit there and honestly think that something could succeed in that kind of an environment. The lab is proving everybody wrong that was a naysayer. Asheville is proving folks wrong in the NPSL previously and where they're heading. So to continue to see growth, in all of these markets that we've seen it grow in and just continue to do it and be examples for the game going forward in all of these places where that you have more of an impact than just wins and losses.
I hope that over the next decade we're talking more and more about soccer changing the world for the better. I think it's something that happens. I think it's something that we all see in different ways, and the world can be a small place and it can be a big place. But I think this sport has a very unique ability to bring people together and I think break down walls that have been created. I see people that I've known in different sectors of my life who are meeting and hanging out and are friends because of Atlanta United. You see that with the Gulch on a match day with people from all walks of life hanging out, getting ready for a game. I think you see it worldwide with players coming to this city, to this country to play and people learning about different countries around the world that they've never visited. And I think, we've seen it with organizations like Fuji's, like Soccer in the Streets, like so many of those all around the world that use soccer as a way to change lives, literally change lives. I hope that we're talking more about that in the next decade, because then soccer will have realized even more of its potential, and that'll be a great thing worldwide. And all the things that you guys both mentioned are part of that. because it doesn't happen if women aren't a bigger part of the game. It doesn't happen if clubs are failing and going out of business. None of that happens without the game being healthy. And if the game's healthy, it can truly change the world. I really believe that.
Absolutely. It's called the world sport for a reason, and it's really starting to get there. But you're right. We need to utilize the tool more than ever and see the power that it has to bring different communities together. And, you know, I saw an article just the other day about how on Christmas Day, World War I paused for a soccer game. You know, and if that's not a story to inspire you about the power of bringing people from two communities together, then I don't know what is.
It's pretty special. It's been a lot of fun in 2019 talking to you two, talking to everybody who's been on the show about the sport, talking to all the people out there who listen via all the social media channels. Just talking about soccer in 2019 has been a lot of fun. Can't wait to start it in 2020, and we'll start doing that on Thursday. We'll ease into the year. We'll take a day off, and then we'll get started on Thursday at 9 a.m. But we do have a date for you to put down on your calendar. February 15th is going to be our first big live show of the year. We'll be doing soccer over there starting on Mondays at the Brew House. But our first big live show will be an Atlanta United preview show. February 15th, it's a Saturday. We're going to do it at lunchtime at Wild Heaven West End. Really looking forward to kind of kicking the season off right. But we're also going to do that as a fundraiser. There's an elementary school in Clayton County that wants to start a soccer program. And they're trying to figure out how to do that with no budget for equipment. Well, we're going to raise the money for equipment that day. So,
I love that so much.
Yeah, it's going to be very fun. We're going to get to kick a program off.
That's exciting times.
So February 15th, mark it down in your calendar. We will see you then. We will be talking to you on Thursday. Be safe. Have a good night. Have a good kickoff to 2020, and we'll be back on Thursday. Mucha plata, y'all.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think she's ever closed the show out before.
No, I'm sorry. I really haven't. I did.
Mucha plata, y'all.
See you later, alligator.